Please make sure that you are muted if you're not speaking. If you're muted, it should have a little X or a little line for that microphone. So there's a couple folks that are out right now. I'm going to change that. So I've gone ahead and I've muted a few people for us so that we can all hear. There's a few of you, when you're not speaking, there's a lot of background noise. So if you're unmuted, it creates a buzz for everybody else, and that's not really going to work out. I'm going to ask that you only unmute yourself when it's time for you to speak or if you have something that you need to say. Again, feel free to pop any questions into the chat just like we've done before, and we'll make sure that we get everything recorded. We do have Brian Hennessy on tonight. He'll be able to answer any questions that you may have from the presentation that you had a chance to watch over the weekend. He's not going to give his presentation, and we've promised him that he's not going to have to do that again because he made that recording for you last week. So hopefully you've had a chance to watch it, you've got all your questions ready, and we'll be able to get going from there. I've also told him that you're going to get all of your questions out of the way tonight. And we're not going to do this again at the full board. We're going to have you only discussing presentations and any potential action items that you may develop at the full board meeting. He'll be on the line for the full board meeting, but only to help correct any information or any misconceptions as we go through. I've committed to him that you guys are going to answer all the questions or ask all the questions that you have tonight, so don't make a liar out of me, please. One last item of business before we really get started today. I'm going to ask that if you have any technical issues, Federica, you shouldn't have to screen share right now. If you'll go ahead and drop that off. You should just be able to plug into the live stream itself and record from there. Anyway, sorry. If you have any technical issues as we go through the night, Heather has put her phone number into the chat. If you have any issues, please text or call her. There's not a whole lot that I can do right now. And with this wonderful wrist brace, I unfortunately cannot text fast enough to actually answer any questions that you may have. So if you're having microphone trouble, anything that you think that we can help with, please reach out to Heather. She's happy to help. It's one of the reasons why she's on tonight and not, sitting with her family eating dinner like the rest of us probably want to be. Okay? So with that, Malcolm, I'm going to unmute you, and I'm going to ask if you have any opening statements for the meeting before we get started.
Well, first off, I appreciate everybody's attendance at this meeting. This is kind of an historic meeting for us coming back after the pandemic situation. I think the presentation that was provided in the video was an awesome presentation, good detailed information. I expect this to be kind of a well-run meeting from the standpoint of providing good information, good questions, responses there too. I encourage everybody to participate if you have questions and to get them answered. If you have a doubt about an issue, get an answer. Don't sit there and say, well, I'm not so sure if I should ask or not. Get an answer. These guys have put in a lot of time, and I know they appreciate our input as much as we can.
All right. So with that, Brian, I know we sent you a couple of different questions this morning that we had. A lot of them from Malcolm himself. So if you would, are you ready to go through some of those and start answering the prepared ones?
Absolutely. First, tell me if you can hear me okay.
Good to go.
Okay, very good. So, Malcolm, got your questions. I want to thank you very much. All good questions. I'm prepared to answer all of them. Unfortunately, I'm working at home. I don't have any way to print out my government email, so I may have to flip over to the questions to read them and then flip back to you to answer them, okay? First question was about something called T-norm, T-E-N-O-R-M. Is it an issue at SRS? And if so, is it handled under the RCRA program? It is not an issue for us. Uh-oh, what happened? Did you lose me?
No, we're still good. Sometimes
Okay.
the video might shift as people join and drop off.
I see. Okay. So I think the question was asked in the context of coal ash, where in coal ash in an impoundment or a ash pile, there might be concentration of naturally occurring radioactive material. No, that was not an issue for us. There are two things that we use or that we consult when we closed our ash management facilities. First of all, there are state regulations, solid waste regulations, governing the disposal of ash. So we had to meet those. But we're also under the Federal Facility Agreement, and as a result, we had to use CERCLA methodology, which calls for our normal chemical analysis and risk assessment based on those chemical concentrations. So no, there was no special consideration of concentrated naturally occurring rad material. And I should also mention that the RCRA corrective action program is not under my purview, but I am not aware of this being an issue on the RCRA corrective action side of our cleanup program either. As a matter of fact, all of our ash cleanup is being done under the Federal Facility Agreement. So the RCRA, any RCRA considerations wouldn't come in there. Okay, does that answer the question? Okay. Let me quickly take a look at question number 2. I believe that he, being me, or I, stated that in the 411 of 515 waste units completed, in some cases, cleanup systems are operating as required. I was confused. If they're completed, all should be operating required, or what am I missing here? Well, what you're, I probably didn't make it very clear during the presentation, but of the 411 that are completed, not all of those 411 required any type of cleanup action. The majority of them, or a large number of them, the investigation and assessment came to the conclusion that they don't require cleanup, so there was nothing to operate. So does that answer that question, Malcolm? Okay. Number 3 had to do with 73 units of the 411 completed require post-closure care, care being in parentheses. Did not catch the context. Does completed mean completed or what? Yes, completed means completed. In other words, the remedy that was selected is built, and all the people who built it have gone away. Construction is done. So the post-closure care refers to the fact that usually, or in many cases, a cover of some type has been constructed over the waste. So the post-closure care involves the inspection of that cover, any maintenance, for instance, if there are any little subsidences or cave-ins, those have to be repaired as they are found. And also there are signs and fences at most of these post-closure care units. We also have to inspect and maintain those. And in any case where we have where we're managing waste in place under a cover, we also, with maybe very few exceptions, we also have to monitor the groundwater for impact from that buried waste. So post-closure care refers to that monitoring and also the inspection and care of any cover and any engineering controls such as fences or signs. Okay, so in 73 cases, we have a remedy in place that requires that type of post-closure care.
if I can go back to question 2, there seems to be a lot of feedback here. Can you hear me okay? Can you hear me? Well, you're muted, so I can read your lips. All right. In question 2, it was more along the context of, I believe that you stated that of the 411 units completed, and I quoted this because it was disturbing to me, in some cases, cleanup systems are operating as required, end quote. The question context was, are there cleanup systems that are not operating as required? Because the implication is there are some that are not operating, and some are operating. And that was the context of the question, because the way you phrased it would seem to imply that while some are operating as required, obviously some are not operating as required. And that was the question.
Okay. No, the perhaps careless way that I stated that, it meant that in some of the 411 cases, there is a system that's operating as required. So of the 411, there are 73 that require an operating system, and they're all running. They're all operating as required. The other 300 and whatever it is don't require a remedial system. Okay?
All right.
Thank you for helping me clear that up. Okay, moving on to number 4. Then the issue of we met all milestones. I asked about this before in relation to the FFA agreements. Milestones in the FFA, milestones in the FFA are sometimes, many times, extended by agreement. It would be nice to understand if we're taking credit for meeting original milestones in the FFA or the extended milestones. Are there any charts that show the milestone deadlines from the original FFA? Scroll up a little bit. Deadlines from the original FFA and their extensions and their final completions to get a sense of whether we are truly meeting the milestones, or does our extension schedule become the milestone that we meet and take credit for? So, yes, the extended milestone is the one that we meet and take credit for. The one that it replaces no longer has any standing. That's why when we or one of the, in rare cases, one of the regulators will request an extension. When we request an extension, we're asking the approval of 2 parties, EPA and the state, that are working with us, and they well understand the need for the extension. And it has to be justified. That's one of the provisions for extension. There has to be a justification for the extension. So when there's a new date, there is no longer an old date that we track.
If I could ask a follow-up to that, and I appreciate that explanation because I understand it more fully now, but as a follow-up, is there any way that we can get a chart or some indication of what the original dates, milestone dates were, the extended milestone date by agreement, and the completion date? That will give us kind of a better feel for where we're tracking here in some sense, because truly meeting milestones is, in some measure, resource allocation. And if resources are allocated, you may be able to meet milestones more quickly, but if you're extending milestones inordinately, then that's a horse of a different color. And I think that's something that we should understand as the Citizen Advisory Board representing the citizens of South Carolina, so to speak.
Sure. Okay. So this is going off script a little here. What you should know, and what I am completely confident of, is that the overwhelming majority of extensions are requested for a technical, not a resource allocation reason. In other words, we are not postponing projects because we can't afford to execute them. That is very rarely the case. There was a case probably 2012 or so where the D area powerhouse ceased operation, and by state regulation, we had to begin closing all of those coal and ash management units within a certain number of months. And it was an enormous project, and it was going to take virtually all of our resources. So by agreement, EPA, DHEC, and we agreed we were going to go gung-ho on these ash management units, and we were going to postpone the other projects that we had planned for those couple of years. But in over the 27-year life of the Federal Facility Agreement, I would venture to say there are hundreds of extensions that you could find in the administrative record file. It would be a tremendous, and I don't believe warranted, task to go back through and mine out all of those extensions to determine what the original date was, what the new date was, what the reason was. All the extension requests and approvals are documented in the administrative record file. I would hate to have somebody go through and tabulate all of the extensions because, frankly, our milestone performance puts every other EM site to shame. And you can say, well, you're not really meeting the milestones, you're extending some of them. We're done with 411 out of 515. That's a record I'm very proud of. And if for we have to, all the three parties, EPA, the state, and we realize that, hey, something that we've got our hands on now is far more complicated than we thought. When we dropped this generic cookie cutter schedule onto this project, and it's going to take more time, and the state and EPA say, yes, we agree, let's go ahead and put a more appropriate schedule on this project. That's what happens most of the time, Malcolm.
If I could ask a follow-up question on that, how many of the 418 that you completed were extended? Do you have any idea? Is it the vast majority, or is it kind of a squat few?
I'm sure you're not interested in speculation about this, but that I could count for you. I could go back through and look at the extensions and just see how many of the 411 had an extension to some milestone on the project, without creating a record of old date, new date. I would say I feel comfortable in speculating that it's probably half of the projects. But that was an interesting question to hit me cold with, because it may not be, because many of the 411 never even went into our remedial investigation program. They were in the initial screening part of the program called site evaluation, and those are a horse of a different color. So I would say $50 or $60 of the 411 probably have one or more extensions associated with them.
Yeah, well, I'm on this screen tonight, and I know that we have a lot of time for every question, so I'm not like taking up an inordinate amount of time here. While we're on the screen, let me ask you kind of a procedural question associated with that. I know that the FFA and other actions that DOE undertakes require notice and comment, public participation. In other words, you pop a notice out and people comment on it. Do your extensions require the same thing? That's one of my written questions. Do the extensions require notice and comment participation from, or are they done via simply a closed door three-party meeting that says, yeah, let's extend this?
So no, they are done among the three parties. They do not require public notice and public comment.
Does a modification of the FFA require public notice and public comment?
Good question. There are two kinds of FFA modifications. There are two kinds of FFA modifications. Major modifications, which do require public notice, and non-major, which do not. So in most cases, I can't remember an extension that was considered a modification of the FFA requiring public notice and comment.
I would say y'all guys should look closely at that, because legally, now that you've gone down that track, I'm not so sure you're on solid ground, but I'll defer that and we'll go on. My last question had to do with the industrial standards. Your comment was that in many instances, we meet industrial standards for release of a particular project, and that's internal release, not release to the outside. And you used the word industrial standards, which will not produce an undue risk. That was kind of your terminology. I was using whether those industrial standards are codified or those are case-by-case one-offs that DOE says, yes, this is the standards we're going to meet, and so therefore those are industrial, or is there some place that we can look at and say, yep, that's the industrial standards that we have to meet, period, and it's documented?
Okay, yes. Yes, this is codified, and not in statute, but in EPA guidance. And in regulation, it is established that what constitutes acceptable risk. There is a risk range of 10 to the minus 4 to 10 to the minus 6 excess cancers. That is the acceptable risk range under CERCLA. And so that range can be applied to unrestricted or residential risk, industrial risk, or recreational, and we can also tailor another exposure scenario, but they all use the same concentrations that are measured on the waste unit. They just assume different amounts and pathways of exposure. So industrial risk assumes amounts of exposure and types of exposure that are in EPA risk assessment guidance for the Superfund program. Yeah, we're not making it up.
I'm sorry, you're making it up, but clearly that's not codified either. Codified is codified in regulation. That's in guidance of what you're talking about. Okay, I will pass the questions. Thank you very much for answering. By the way, I thought your presentation, like I said in my writing, was comprehensive, good, solid. I wish that I understood things better, that I could understand the presentation better, but it was a good presentation and I appreciate it. Thanks.
Sure. Very welcome, and thank you for the questions.
Right. Thanks, Malcolm. Brian, I know you got another set from Jim Gill, I believe.
Yes, I saw two questions from Jim Gill. One of them, I think I already answered. It was about what does post-closure care and maintenance mean? I'll answer it again.
Yeah, he's shaking. He agrees with you.
Yeah, I'll answer it again. It's inspection and maintenance of any covers or any controls, access controls, fences and signs and whatnot, and also the monitoring of groundwater impact from essentially buried hazardous substances. His other question was about funding. And let me see, I don't have... Can someone read that question to me, or do I need to go into my email and find it?
Where'd that come from?
Just give me half a second.
Here it is. I've got it.
Yeah, let me help you out. I wrote it, so I can help you out. This is Jim Gill.
Okay, thank you.
You have, towards the end of the presentation, there was a Gantt chart that basically looked out for 10 years as to major projects. So my question is there an accompanying estimate of total cost spread, and how is it quantified over each of the 10 years? And as corollary to that, is any of that information in future dollars, or are you dealing strictly in current dollars?
First, let me answer the question about the how much, and then I'm going to take a guess as to whether there is. Can you hear me right now? Am I muted? I'm not muted. So the fiscal years 21 through 24. First of all, our contractor, Savannah River Nuclear Solutions, prepares the cost estimate and the baseline. They execute this baseline of scope and schedule and funding. And so that baseline, unfortunately, they're only required to produce a baseline for the next 5 years. So, I mean, it's still significant, but we can talk about FY 21 through 25 in terms of dollars. There is no estimate for 26 and beyond. But for 21 through 24, the estimate ranges from 59 to 63 million. It's somewhere in that range for each of those 4 years. And for FY 25, the estimate is 55. That's 55 million. Okay. Now, man, that's a good question about whether are those in FY 20 dollars or is there escalation assumed each year? I can't really answer it. The difference wouldn't be huge. It would be 1 or 2%, right? But it's a great question, and I'll try to get. It's an easy question too. The contractor can answer it for me, but I don't have that. I can't answer that authoritatively right now, Jim. I'm sorry. But did you get the cost figures?
Yeah, no, I understand what you're saying, and
yeah.
What it tells me is that the funding requirements are reasonably level loaded across the years. I assume you guys have smoothed all that stuff out so that you're not looking at sharp increases or need for funding and therefore risk going to any of those programs.
That's right. That's one of the things that headquarters imposes on us, you know, because the federal budget process, which you probably know better than I do, only looks out a year or two. And beyond that, you're kind of swagging. So what they tell you is when you're making these multi-year baselines, just do us a favor and kind of assume that the funding remains fairly level. Don't jack it up $20 million on us. So we do assume a fairly level amount of funding in those out years that go out past the budget process.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Okay, sure.
All right, great. So those are the questions that we received in advance, Brian. So anything from here on out is going to be coming at you cold. So
okay.
I hope you're ready for it. I'm just going to go around and look at the board members that I know that we have on. Does anybody want to go first who has their video on? I can see a hand raised. If anybody has any questions? No? Greg's shaking his head no. Narendra, do you have anything? No? Phyllis, how about you? I think I saw you shake your head no. Phyllis is one of our new members. This is about her second full board we're rolling into. And she's been a real trooper trying to keep up with everything. This is a tough year to start on as a CAB member. So, don't hesitate to reach out if there's anything that you need to know or something that seems weird. Please let us know about it. Charles, I see you're also on. Do you have any questions? I'll give you a second to unmute if you do.
I'm good, James.
All right. Carlos, how about you? I'll let it go. All right. Is anybody else? Malcolm, yeah. Let's go for it. Round 2.
All right, round two. You're right. Now, and I want to go back to the question of the milestones. And I have a ton of respect for y'all guys, as y'all well know, and for what y'all are doing, and y'all are doing a ton of things, good things for our community. But it's kind of a hollow response to say that you don't have any idea or don't track the modifications of milestones for each project. And then, so when you have the final completion date, that you can't and haven't gone back and looked at, oh yeah, well, this milestone was extended here, was extended here, but here was our initial completion date. Excuse me for saying it, sir, but that's a kind of a hollow response of yours in that regard. If that's your way you've done in the past, then I would strongly encourage you or suggest that y'all track that. It isn't hard to track for whatever you have going on in the future, so you have a sense of the historical aspect of what your projects are. You can learn from that. Why was this project extended? And when you say, oh, there were technological reasons and not resource reasons, the truth of the matter is that's a little hollow too. Most of it's resource regions. If you throw enough money at a problem, you're going to get technology advanced. We've all seen that constantly. So, it sounds to me like you're ducking the question of what was your real milestone and maybe missing an opportunity to understand why that milestone was extended versus not extended, where you can learn lessons for the future. So I go back to that, and it's just a commentary, maybe not even a question, but a suggestion that at least for the milestones going forward, when you pop a completion date, say, here's our history associated with this.
Okay, thank you. I take that. I take that suggestion. Yeah, I wish that my counterparts from EPA in the state were here to back up my hollow statement. But yeah, we will track milestones going forward from this day. That's not a problem. And like I said, Malcolm, the information is in the administrative record about every extension that has happened in the past. Reason for the extension, the amount of time that we said we need. Yeah, I didn't prepare a position paper on milestones and extensions, but there's a reason why every federal facility agreement and tri-party agreement has provisions for extension, because when FFAs were first laid out, they used a generic schedule for every project. Every project fits in the same mold. And of course, as you can imagine, that's not how it goes. Once you hit the field and once you find that there's information that doesn't meet expectations, or isn't what we expected, and that we need to regroup on this. We might need to go out and collect some more data because we're not finding what we expected to find. Yeah, I'll just say that it's perfectly reasonable to ask us to account for milestones on these projects and for extensions to milestones that we found couldn't be met for one reason or another. So we will do that.
Brian, I have a question for you before we open it back up. I know that you're on the tracking the milestones and FAA side, regulatory compliance, and maybe not so much the program side, but I'm going to ask anyway. Would it be fair to say that when these technological issues do come up, that there are lesson learned, opportunities done, that they don't just slide by, that the department does some work in this and does capture the issues and learn from them? Would that be fair?
Yeah, it has some merit. I want to make sure also that we talk about the subtle difference between the terms technological and technical.
Technically,
okay?
sorry.
Yeah. Technological implies that, gee, we've got a problem here, and there's nothing on the shelf that can handle it. So give us a couple of years to go find something. That would be technological, and that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
What I'm talking about are technical reasons, meaning we, the three parties, feel that we need more time on the phase of the project that we're in, either to go back and conduct additional investigation, or, there's a project going on right now where it's been delayed several times because it's impacted by a dispute that's going on at another EM facility. And so EPA kind of asked us to let's put the remedial decision for the lower three runs stream system on hold here while this dispute at the Oak Ridge EM site is adjudicated, because the EPA sees a common issue and they don't want to go ahead with decision making on our stream system until this other dispute at Oak Ridge has been resolved. So, that's an example of maybe something that's not purely technical. That might be more administrative, but it's an example of not really technological. It's a deliberate decision by the three decision makers to not blindly adhere to a schedule and rush a decision that we can't defend. Let's take the time we need to carefully analyze this and come up with a decision that we can defend. So sometimes that just takes more time than the initial cookie cutter 3-year schedule gave us for starting the investigation to issuing a decision. Sometimes it just isn't enough. It's very situation dependent.
Thanks, Brian. I think that's a great distinction to make, and that's definitely helped me understand things quite a bit better. Are there any other questions from board members going around? Greg?
Yeah, thank you very much. And by the way, I think the videos are awesome. That's a great way to do this stuff. So thank you for going to the trouble of doing that. Thank you, Brian, for putting it together, and James for coordinating all that. So listening to the discussion about milestones was really interesting. Sounds like from what Brian said, we got a bit more than 400 milestones. We've extended, 50 to 60, so that's 10 to 15%. So, it doesn't happen a lot, but it sounds like it's certainly not unheard of to happen. So I guess I guess this comes down to a question of culture and how the SRS folks think about deadlines and stuff. And another way to get at this is how often, when extensions are requested, is the request rejected?
Okay, so I want to make sure that the numbers that you cited, that everyone understands them. We have 515 release sites on SRS that we're tracking. For 411 of those, a decision has been issued. Okay. Now, as I said earlier, I know that y'all are not familiar with this screening process called site evaluation that we use, but a lot of those release sites didn't come right into the main cleanup program where we investigate, we assess risk, we evaluate alternatives, and we do a cleanup. A lot of them were handled in that preliminary screening phase and never needed to come into the remedial assessment program. So I'm going to say, I'm going to guess that of these 411, 100 to 150 got into our investigation and assessment program. And of those, 50 may have had an extension along the way, from the beginning of the investigation to the issuing of the decision. Okay, so it's not the number of milestones that were extended, it's the number of projects that experienced an extension. So it might not be all that important, but I just wanted to make sure we're all speaking the same language. Now, after all that, I'm afraid I've forgotten your question.
Fair enough. I understand. I do that myself sometimes. How often when an extension is requested is it denied?
Oh, okay. So, I won't say never, because the Federal Facility Agreement, the FFA program, also includes the radioactive liquid waste tanks. Okay? Now, there have been, and that's under the FFA, it's also under the Industrial Wastewater Program at South Carolina DHEC. But under the FFA, there have been extensions requested for radioactive liquid waste tanks that were not granted and which resulted in formal disputes. Okay? Which, but that is, I'm going to say, 3 or 4 cases out of the dozens and dozens of extension requests. On the traditional FFA side of the program, which is the cleanup of soil, groundwater, and surface water, we don't hit EPA and the state cold or blindside them with requests for an extension. Hey, we're behind schedule here. Will you give us a few more months? It's not like that. We are all working closely enough on these projects that they can see an extension request coming as just as well as we can. And so the answer on that large subset of projects is they are always approved. If they were not to be approved, then we would either hurry up and finish a document that we know is not a good one and just mail it out to meet the milestone, which doesn't serve the interests of the project, or we would miss a milestone and we would be subject to fines and penalties.
Right.
But because we're all collaboratively working on these projects, and they know where we are, they understand everything that we understand about conditions at these projects. They are disposed to accommodate us when we request an extension. Because like I said, it's all about, at each step of the project, we do the investigation, we do a risk assessment to determine whether or not a remedy is needed. If a remedy is needed, we do an evaluation of alternatives. We want to make sure that we're all together, collaborative on the suite of remedial alternatives that we're going to look at. And then, it comes to the crux of it, the remedial decision. Everybody's got to be together at that point. And we don't submit the documents here until the 3 parties have a common understanding of what's happening and are in essential agreement. That's what differentiates us from the other sites. And
that's interesting. Okay.
We don't ship documents to the regulators that they go, what is this? Oh, this is preposterous. We don't agree with this. That's
Brian,
the essence of it. Yes.
Just to interrupt for a second, I just want to revise and extend the remark you made earlier. Early on in that answer, you said we would either hurry up and my words, not exactly the way you said it, and send a substandard document to the regulators, or we would go back and negotiate a new date or a new milestone when we know circumstances aren't going to allow the department to complete it on the previously agreed to and established schedule. What really happens in actuality is when we see that happening, we negotiate. We approach the regulators and negotiate something, because the alternative would be to just put out a substandard document. And I just wanted to make it clear, you weren't saying that that's what the department does. No, what we do is that would be the alternative to entering into a good faith negotiation with the regulators. And because we maintain a positive relationship with those regulators, they're open into listening to it, and those negotiations are usually successful. Sometimes we bring a little more something to the table. Many times they listen to our arguments, if there's merit to it, and agree to it with nothing else. So I didn't want to leave the impression with the CAB members that no, we'll either do one or the other. We'll do the other. We don't put out substandard documents. And I didn't think that's what you were trying to say to them. I just wanted to clarify.
No, of course not. Thanks for that clarification, Michael. Yeah, I was just going to lay out here's the situation. If you're in this situation, here are the alternatives that you've got. Send in a substandard document, which we, no, in this day and age, we would not do that. That's completely counterproductive and it doesn't honor what we're trying to accomplish here. So yes, in that circumstance, and like I said, I hope everyone understands that in the life of these projects, we, the Savannah River site, we're not working in a vacuum with EPA and the state just waiting to see our next document. They're very much aware of what's going on, the information that we've got, because in the end, it's a three-party decision, and we're going to move forward as three parties all along the life of the project. So yeah, no, we would not send in a substandard document. That would be antithetical to the FFA we've got here.
Hey, Brian, this is Mac. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Hey, I think it'd be wise if you describe, I think everybody's familiar with the core team process. If I'm hearing you right, that's what you're describing, because the EPA, the state, they're all engaged along the whole continuum until completion of that project. And like you said earlier, if they see an issue prior to it being completed, we stop, we pause, we look at it carefully and do analysis and determine what's appropriate steps to take going forward to meet the milestone. So I think that's your core team process you use through the whole process, right? I mean, I just want to make sure I'm clear in what you're explaining. Is that how we apply it?
This is Brian again. Yes, Mac, thank you very much. What I described is the core team process, where, I've used the word collaboration several times. We don't make decisions in a vacuum. We make them from a standpoint of collaboration. And we don't make them until all three parties have a shared or common understanding of the situation at a given unit that we have to make a decision on. So no, there's no arm twisting, and the core team. The essence of the core team process is not progressing on a project until we achieve that agreement. That is the essence of it. So thank you, Mac. I was reluctant to digress off into core team land, but that's certainly something characteristic of SRS, and which EM is actually trying to establish around the EM complex at other sites. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it.
I think that, I know that you didn't necessarily want to delve into it a little bit, Brian, but I think it is worth mentioning that this is something that is unique to SR in the way that there is an extremely positive and proactive working relationship with the regulators, and you don't always see that in a lot of the other sites. I talk to my other CAB counterparts, and I sit in other CAB meetings or the chairs meetings, and I listen to them talk about their relationships, and it's not nearly as positive. So I know that while we're all sitting here listening to Brian, almost all of us are thinking, of course, this is how it should be. This is how groups of people should work together. But I want you to understand just how special and unique it is that they've put together a group where it really is proactive and trusting, and it is a model across the department from what I can tell. So definitely something to brag about, even though Brian
doesn't. Absolutely. Yeah, and if somebody thinks that, well, we ought to, all three parties ought to just assert what they think, and if it's adversarial, so be it. Slug it out. No, that's what EM's been trying for 20 years at other sites, and it does not work. It wastes a lot of time and money. Collaboration is a much shorter and more direct route to a productive and defensible decision. Hey, I wanted to mention something to Malcolm. He had another question in his list that we didn't get to. He asked about the accelerated cleanup agreement. He asked whether it was part of the federal facility agreement or just what is it? And I wanted to tell him that it is not part of the FFA. It is not enforceable, but it's only a couple of pages, and you can read it on the external website, srs.gov. It's under the Programs tab. The particular program is Area Completion Project or Program. I'm not sure which one it says. Area Completion Project. And when you get to that page, if you click on General Information, there are maybe half a dozen documents there, and one of them is the Memorandum of Agreement for Achieving an Accelerated Cleanup Vision. And it's signed by not only myself and my counterparts, but upper-level management at EPA Region 4, South Carolina DHEC, and DOE Savannah River. And one of the things that all three parties endorsed back in 2002 when this Memorandum of Agreement was signed was working collaboratively using the core team process. So it's a real thing. It's real, and all three parties are very stubborn about using it.
All right, thank you. Are there any other questions from the CAB members? Any discussion points that you guys need to hit? Anything that you want to talk about regarding this?
I'd like to mention something, some information that I got from someone who happens to be listening on the phone but not on the WebEx, a little statistical information. Of the 411 units that are complete, meaning a decision's been issued, 228 of them were units in that site evaluation program that I mentioned, that initial screen, that were determined to require no further evaluation, assessment, or action. So 228 is not quite half of 515, but it is a healthy percentage. And it's a healthy percent of the 411 too. So that leaves about 183 or so that did not go, that were not no further action site evaluation units. So 183 of those units went into the process where I'll stand by that earlier number. 50 of those, there may have been an extension involved of 180 something. Okay, so I hope I didn't just throw a jumble of numbers at you. I thought it was significant, and I appreciate Sheila looking that up for me. So 228 of the 515 were no further action, and so they would not be in this extension universe that we're talking about.
All right. Any other last questions for him?
While we're on the FFA accelerated document, could you give us a sense of what did that accelerate? When you mentioned it in your talk, I didn't get a good sense of it, maybe because I lost the context. But it sounds like an awesome document where y'all did do a lot of acceleration work in your collaboration with the other two parties to the FFA. So what was kind of some of the substance in it?
Brian, you're muted. There we go.
Yes, I was muted. Thank you. It was some principles that the three parties agreed to, Malcolm, in order to going forward, because this happened at a time in the program where we sort of realized that, hey, we don't just have 511 release sites out here. We've got over 1,000 EM buildings that need to be decommissioned. And we haven't even considered whether or not some of those may be contributing to an environmental release. So we came up with a process for screening those buildings. And we modified the federal facility agreement to add facility decommissioning to it. Let's see, we also, like I said, the three parties endorsed the use of the core team process for decision-making collaboratively, because we had just started using that maybe 1999. And let me see, what other principles? One of the major concepts that it endorsed, Malcolm, was rather than just working our way through this list of 511 rather helter-skelter, we organized all the release sites into by industrial area, and we came up with some methodologies, some technical methodologies for investigating and evaluating and doing remedial decision-making at the level of an industrial area instead of release site by release site. We got some economies of scale and just streamlined our process a bit to do kind of to aggregate release sites by industrial area. I think those are the main points. We managed to fill up 2 or 3 pages with other points, but those are the ones that I remember right now. And like I said, that MOA, or Memorandum of Agreement, is on the external website under the Area Completion Project as one of the items on the General Information link. It's called a Memorandum of Agreement for Achieving an Accelerated Cleanup Vision.
Thank you.
Okay. Any more questions? Comments? Concerns? Soapboxes? No? Okay. Well, that looks like that may be it for today. Thank everybody for tuning in, getting all your questions out, trying to get everything answered. If you'd like, we'll continue the tradition that we did from the IPL education sessions. If those of you, if anybody has any, cab update or process questions that you want to hang on for, I'll be happy to stay on for a few more minutes. But otherwise, we can stop recording and close the meeting in case, if no one has any further questions for Brian.
James, this is Amy. I'd like for Heather and Dee and you guys to stay on too, if you don't mind, for just a few minutes after.
Sure.
And welcome, Phyllis. It's good to have you.
Thank you.
All right.
Hey, James, this is Brian. I just wanted to say thanks to Michael McLanus and Jimmy McMillan for weighing in and for saving me, really. There's some things I wasn't very clear on, and I completely forgot to mention our core team process, and it's a bedrock principle here. So thank you to them. Malcolm and Jim, thanks for your questions. I know there was another gentleman that asked questions. I've forgotten who it was. But anyway, yeah, thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Good job for everybody. Thank you.
You did a great job.